our agenda for this webinar, kind of split it up into two sections. We've got our what's new in AutoCAD 2023, and we're going to be taking a look at some of the automation and productivity tools that are supplied by Autodesk, and the new or newer AutoCAD mobility, such as AutoCAD Anywhere, and some of the new features. And then in the second half of the webinar, we're actually going to be looking more closely at some of the automation tools that we can use, such as scripts and Lisps and macros, as well as doing a kind of live demo to really kind of give you guys an idea of just how easy it is to get started with this sort of thing. So first off, what's new in AutoCAD 2023? So one of the big focuses with AutoCAD 2023 is there's a greater focus on automation. There's a very new cool feature that we're going to get to talk about a little bit later. They're very much pushing the mobility aspect. So we have this AutoCAD Anywhere where we can use it on phones, on browser, or actually the desktop app. And they've been kind of continuously improving it to bring its functionality a bit more in line with that of what we're used to with the desktop app. And then continuous innovation. So again, AutoCAD still is, despite its age and how long it's been around, they're still finding new things to add and to change with the software. So one of the big focuses, like I said, was on automation, or just improving our productivity in general. The main thing that the Autodesk want to push anyway is that using specialized tool sets. So anyone who has a full AutoCAD subscription, you will have access to these specialized tool sets, and these can range from all sorts of things from AEC to manufacturing, HVAC, electrical, that sort of thing. We can see a list of the tool sets here. So we have architecture tool set, mechanical, electrical, MEP, plant 3D, map 3D, and the last one, raster to design tool set. So really the main thing to think with these specialized tool sets is what they effectively are is AutoCAD, but they've added a load of functionality for these relevant fields. These can be things like blocks, icons, new commands, scripts, that sort of thing. So really, if what you're doing is working on floor plans or architectural drawings, you should really, and you have full AutoCAD, you should be taking a look at the tool set or the specialized tool set. Same for any of these industries. There's really nothing to lose with doing it, because it's not like you're losing any functionality with AutoCAD. You're basically just gaining functionality. So let's just go into the next slide here. So an example here of the kind of architecture, engineering, and construction one. So you've got things like automating floor plans, sections, and elevation drawings, real-time error checking for wiring diagrams, detailed concepts, being able to link database data for maps and drawings, and a ton of other additional built-in automations and industry-specific workflows, because these tool sets have been designed basically by people working in these industries. These are the kind of features and things that they're requested, and they split them into these specialized tool sets as to not bloat AutoCAD, with all of these different industry specific things. Another example would be our design and manufacturing. So we've got things like hundreds of thousands of symbols for parts, electrical piping, HVAC systems, automatic alignment, connection of parts, can calculate forces, and create bills of materials. In terms of our unmatched mobility, so this is again in reference to the AutoCAD Anywhere kind of thing that Autodesk are pushing. We have this ability now to access DWG drawings and actually edit or mark them up pretty much wherever we are, as long as we have access to those drawing files. So again, we have desktop. We're all used to that. That's your standard AutoCAD desktop application. Mobile app. This allows you to basically view and edit drawings. Now, I imagine a lot of us don't want to be, trying to use a mobile phone to do our drawings, but this is kind of what they would recommend is using, say, like a tablet in the field for doing markups and things like that. And then we have the web app, which has gotten added functionality. If we go on to the next page here. So with the web app, they've actually expanded the amount of cloud services that are kind of supported by the web app, making it easier for you to open drawings. So kind of very similar to how, if we're all used to using Office, how you have web apps for things like Word and Excel, or you have your desktop app. So now they basically kind of brought that in for AutoCAD. So if you're working remotely or on, on a business trip or on site, you can still access basically all of your drawings, even if you don't happen to have AutoCAD installed on that particular computer. Next up, the kind of continuous innovation, or really kind of just looking at the new changes, new features that we're getting in AutoCAD 2023. So one of the coolest ones, in my opinion, and honestly, I was quite excited when I saw this, is the new My Insights section. So what this is they basically use machine learning or AI to help analyze the way you work and provide tips or new features or kind of suggestions, but it even starts to go as far as creating small macros for you. Now, I wish I could actually demonstrate this, but I haven't used AutoCAD 2023 enough for it to actually generate any of these macros for me. It does give me a few tips and tricks, but it hasn't gone ahead and created any macros for me. So it's one of those things that the more you use it, the better it gets. That's kind of how this machine learning stuff works. The more data you give it, the better it's going to be at predicting or providing solutions to you. We've got the new Markup Import and Markup Assist tool. This is mainly used for, say, you've got a page drawing, a physical printed drawing, and someone's done a markup on it, red line, and before we could scan that and we'd have to kind of fix it on the main one. Now we have this new tool that allows us to import this kind of feedback directly into the DWG, skipping all of the manual steps. And it even actually has things like text recognition or OCR. So you can actually, if you have text on those PDFs or scanned documents, it'll actually attempt to turn that into a text object within AutoCAD. Basically, they're trying to remove as many barriers for entry or steps as possible for getting feedback into your drawings. So again, removing all those unnecessary steps in between. Another really cool thing when it comes to automation is the Lisp API now for web. So we're going to be talking about Lisps later. They're one of my favorite things to use in AutoCAD, but this is pretty cool for me. Again, I haven't used the online web version of AutoCAD, but the fact that it now supports Lisps is huge. So if you are someone like me who uses Lisps to automate a lot of their work in AutoCAD, this means that if I'm working on the web browser, I now still have access to this incredibly powerful feature. Do note, for LT users, you will not have access to Lisps or the specialized toolsets. Those only are available in the full version of AutoCAD. Some other updates to AutoCAD 2023. So new updates to floating windows. So we can now drag out our drawings and have them in separate windows. They've improved a lot of the performance of that. Currently working, this is great if you're working with multiple monitor setups, where you can have AutoCAD on one screen and you might have another drawing over here as a reference, or while you're working on another one, or if you needed to swap back between the two, I can now just click on either screen and just easily get access to each drawing. There's a few other small minor changes to the trace functionality, count, sheet set manager, and more. So really just small updates, little improvements, mainly optimizations, speeding things up, and trying to remove any kind of what they would consider redundant steps, AutoCAD LT 2023. So the real difference, like AutoCAD LT 2023, did get a number of updates as well. It did get the same new features as AutoCAD, the full version, just without the automation, such as like the Lisps. But it still has the AutoCAD Anywhere, but you won't have access to those specialized tool sets. But basically everything they included with the full version of AutoCAD also made its way into the LT version as well. So now on to the fun bit, automation. So really what I wanted to talk about today, the main focus I had for this webinar was I really just wanted to show some of the basics of creating scripts and Lisps within AutoCAD so that you will have some idea of where to go and start experimenting really. Because that's how I got into it. I had a number of tasks I wanted to do, and I just started slowly making simple scripts, and then eventually was able to start making slightly more complicated ones. So, automation tools in AutoCAD. So why use automation in AutoCAD? So it's pretty simple. Speed up your workflow. You know, instead of manually inputting a number of steps, you can just create a custom command that does it for you. Greater consistency. This can be quite useful if you're doing a lot of the same thing across a lot of drawings. You basically, create one script and have that run across all the drawings, and it's going to do the same thing on each one. Simplifying complex processes. So this is, what I mean by this is if you have something that you need to do and it's going to take multiple different steps, you can kind of simplify it by taking all of those steps and shoving them into a script. So you now only have to run the script and it will do all the manual steps in between. Big, huge one, reducing repetitive tasks. Nobody likes doing the same thing over and over and over again. So if you have something that you're doing consistently all the time, that would be a very good candidate for, excuse me, for scripting. And really, it's kind of Symetri's favorite saying, work smarter, not harder. There's no reason to be doing the same thing over and over again. If you start picking up scripting and stuff like that, you honestly, personally, I find it addicting. I think I spend more time writing scripts to do work for me than actually doing it. So what are the kind of options available to us? So outside of the new My Insight section that was in 2023 and the specialized toolkits, there's always been a few different things we have here. So the most basic one we have is the macro recorder or action recorder that's built into AutoCAD. And I believe that's also in AutoCAD LT. Then we have simple script files, also known as SCR files. I'm sure some of you may have come across these before. Then we have AutoLisp or LSP files, and this is my favorite kind of scripting language at the moment. And then we have Visual Basic, which is quite an old system, and while very, very powerful, I haven't really touched it, and not a lot of people do because it is very difficult to work in. Cool. So moving on. I just kind of wanted to go quickly over the differences between each of those for anyone here who might not be familiar with them. So the macro recorder, or action recorder as it's also called, is the simplest to use, it's easy to access, and it comes built into AutoCAD. Now, negatives with it, it is very, very limited in what it can do. You basically cannot use it for anything that would open up an input window or a dialog window. And effectively, all you can do is record a simple action and it will repeat it. So it cannot create any kind of complex functions. And one of the main things is it can't be edited or not easily edited afterwards. So if you made a mistake or you wanted to change something about it, you pretty much have to recreate it from scratch. So I don't tend to use the action recorder at all, but it can be useful under some very specific circumstances. SCR scripts, or basic AutoCAD scripts, are one of the most common. They're very simple to write. You can create much more complex functions than the macro recorder. They can be loaded easily or on startup and can be run across multiple files. Now, the drawbacks with them, you can't create custom commands, and we'll take a look at that in a bit. So they will run, they basically run immediately when they're loaded. And they can't take things like user input, such as different values or, say, clicking a point on a screen. So they can be quite limited in that regard. This is where kind of AutoLisp comes in. So AutoLisp allows us to create incredibly complex functions. It can create custom commands which can be really handy. It can be auto-loaded, and what I mean by this is you can basically add it to your startup suite. So if there's a number of functions or commands that you've created for yourself, you can actually have that basically load every time you open up AutoCAD, and then you just have to type in whatever command it is you created. It can pause for user input, and it is relatively simple to write. I'll show you some pretty handy ways of, if you're used to writing SCR scripts, how we can start to bring that across and convert them into AutoLisp scripts, basically. Negatives of it, it can be a little bit hard to read and understand, especially if you don't have any background in programming languages. It is quite an old language, and the syntax, as it would be called, so the kind of format in which it works, is a little bit weird. But once you kind of get your head around it, it makes a lot more sense. And yeah, the other negative, more complex to write. But you can still keep it really simple, and I'll show you how. And finally, we have the visual basics. So this is an incredibly powerful thing. You can create custom user interfaces or GUI elements, basically create whole programs. But because of this, it's incredibly difficult to use, and it's kind of requires its own arcane knowledge of how it works. So I've pretty much avoided it where possible. I've never found a need to actually use it. It really is something that is a bit of a holdover from quite a while ago. So without further ado, what we're going to do is we're just going to jump into a live demo, because I don't feel like boring you with PowerPoint slides all day. So what I'm going to do is I'm just actually going to jump over into AutoCAD here, and we're going to take a look at some of the different features that we use there. So I suppose the first one, I have AutoCAD 2023 here. The first one I might as well show you is the new My Insights, because honestly, this is one of the things I'm really kind of keeping an eye on. I'm really curious to see how well this works. So under the Start page here, we have this My Insights button. And if I click on it, this is where our insights will be generated. So right now you can see there are no insights available for me, but again, that's because I haven't actually been using 2023 enough for it to generate it. But you can see it has provided me some feature recommendations. So things like I've been using a lot of XREF related tools. So it's going to provide me a video on using the XREF compare feature, or using blocks. It's going to give me feature enhancements. So what's new, basically. So it's actually really worth checking back in on the My Insights and kind of seeing what is it offering you? What does it think would be useful for you to know? Because some of these things you might not have known about before, because my God, AutoCAD likes to hide a lot of its cool features. So it's kind of nice that they're bringing that to the forefront a little bit more. In the actual drawing space here, first thing I'm going to take a look at is the macro recorder or action recorder. So I'm really just going to do something very simple, and that's just drawing a box, basically. I just need to draw a rectangle, and I'm going to make it 100 by 200. Or we'll just simplify it even more. We'll just do 100 by 100. So the easiest way most of us would take a rectangle. I'll start at my origin, so 0, 0, and then I can type in 100 by 100. So that's drawn a box manually. Now, if I wanted to do that automatically, or maybe repeat that, we could use the action recorder. If I go under the Manage tab here, notice I have this box here called Action Recorder. We have a record, and we have an option to play or a list of different macros that might have been available. So really, the only way to use this is you click record, and then you just do whatever action you want. You can see a little recording symbol has appeared over my crosshair just to let me know that it's recording. So 0, 0, and then I'll do 100 by 100. Once I'm done inputting my commands, I'll go back over to the Manage tab and I'll stop the recording. At this point, it's going to give me, allow me to put in the name. So I'll just put rectangle test. And I'll hit OK. Oh, sorry, not allowed to put spaces in it. Rectangle test. So I'll delete this square here. And now if I play rectangle test, you can see it's put it back in there. It's basically going to repeat those exact steps that I had earlier. The big problem with this is that's about as far as we can go with it. If you have anything that requires opening a dialog box, you know, maybe something like defining attributes, anything like this that pulls the user input, macro recorders don't work with. And again, like I said, if I needed this square to be placed somewhere like under my cursor, it's just not something that you're able to do with it. So very, very basic use case scenario. The next step up would be writing actual AutoCAD scripts or SCR files. Now, what's really, really nice about these is they're very, very straightforward. So effectively, what they are is just a list of command inputs. So if I were to open up even just something as simple as Notepad, I can start writing an AutoCAD script. So if I wanted to create a rectangle, I would put in my command rectang, and then I would do 0, 0, and then in this case, I'm using coordinates. So if I want them to be 100 by 100, I'm going to make my next point 100 on the X and the Y. And then you have to always leave one blank line at the end, because a blank line in scripting, in AutoCAD scripts, counts as a enter key. So effectively what's happening here is it's typing in this command, and then the new line means it's hit enter, it's inputting this value, hitting enter, inputting this value, and then this blank line at the end is the last enter key to actually run everything. So I can just highlight everything here, and I could just copy paste it into my command bar, and you can see now it's created that rectangle. So that's a pretty handy way of testing it, but that's effectively all a script is. If you can do what it is you need to do via the command line, then you can easily put it into a script. If I wanted to run this script without copy pasting the things, I'd have to save it first. So right now it's just an untitled text document, but if I save it, and I'll go into here, and I'll just save it as rectangle demo, and we're going to save it as a .scr file. So we don't need to do any fancy conversion or anything, we just need to rename it from a text file to .scr. From here, then I can either run the script from the Manage tab here. See, I can select in the script I want and hit open. And you notice now that I've run the script, it's just put in that rectangle. So again, it's better because we can use a lot more commands. My tip for anyone who wants to just use simple scripts is, if you're looking for a command, look for, so say, you want to type in some text, right? If I type in text here, it usually brings up some things that require user input. But a lot of commands in AutoCAD have this version that has a small dash in front of it. What that means is this command will run entirely from the command line now. So if I were to do this, notice that now my command line is pretty much the only thing I need. So if I wanted to, say, put in some text, I basically just do it from the command line. And once I know what my series of commands are, I can just put them in order in my AutoCAD file or in my AutoCAD script. So generally, the way I go about creating a script is I have a series of things that I need to do. I will then sit down and I will figure out what commands and what inputs I need to put into the command line to achieve that. And then from there, I can take that list of commands and inputs and put them into an SCR file. And then when I run that, it should run the same exact series of events. But again, we're kind of limited where if we wanted something, say, I want to create a square under my cursor. I want to run a command and then click somewhere and have it place a square. I can't do that with the script files, not easily anyway. So this is where AutoLisp comes in. For those of you who are interested in creating your own AutoLisp scripts, AutoCAD actually has a really nice integration with Visual Studio Code, which is another program, and it has actual support like plugins for using Lisps. So I'm actually going to show you guys. I haven't had it. I specifically don't have it set up on this laptop, so I could show you the process of it and just how easy it is. So here, under my applications menu here, I have this Visual Lisp editor. So if I click on this, for the first time I click on this, it'll ask me which environment do I want to use. Now, the second option is the legacy behavior, and I wouldn't recommend that. What I would recommend is the Microsoft Visual Studio Code and AutoLisp extension. So if I click on this, usually you can see here installing the AutoCAD AutoLisp extension. So I already have Visual Studio Code downloaded. You see it's open there, so allow extension to open this URL. So yes. And so that's installed the AutoLisp plugin. So really what this plugin does is it's going to help us actually program and debug our Lisp files. So here, if I go to my Explorer, I'm just going to open this folder here so I can see my different files. So if I click on this Lisp_demo here, so you can see here that because we have this plugin, it actually recognizes an LSP file, and it has what we call syntax highlighting, which is just kind of a way of making it easier for us to read the code that we're writing. So what we're actually going to do, I'm going to show you how to create a very, very simple AutoLisp to drop down that rectangle under our cursor. So really, it's actually just this one here that's 4 lines long. Okay, and don't worry about not understanding what each of these things are. I will explain some of it, but also there is extensive documentation on all of these different commands online and provided by Autodesk. So basically, if you're learning it, you will be spending some time on the AutoLisp wiki, learning all the different things, but honestly, I'd say it's really worth it. So let's just create a new Lisp file. So I'm going to go New File, and from here, I'm just going to do live demo, or sorry, new text file, and save this as a Lisp file. So I'll do live demo, and then instead of plain text here, I'm going to choose this AutoLisp option here. .lsp is what we want. So save it. Now that it's registered as an LSP file, you can actually see down here that that language mode has been changed to AutoLisp. So it's going to provide us that syntax highlighting. So what I'm going to do, and what I normally do, is start by creating a function. And what I mean by a function, I mean like a custom command that we can run in AutoCAD. This is one of my favorite bits about using Lisps. So put my brackets, defun means define function. And you can see because I have the Lisp plugin, it's actually going to start giving me suggestions, kind of telling me what I need to type in. And I'm just going to call this demo1. And I need to put in some brackets there. Again, I'm not going to have time in this webinar to explain the ins and outs of all the syntax that goes into this, but now the next thing is let's start simple and just get it to run the same commands that we had it run before to give us that square on our origin point. So there are ways of doing it purely through Lisp, but one of the ways, and it's my kind of trick to starting out, is there is a command in Lisp just called command. And what this does effectively is it's just going to allow us to input things into the command line. So I'll type in the list of things that I wanted to enter into the command line. And each one of them is just separated by a space, and you just put it in quotation marks like this. So what this will do is it's going to create a function called demo1, and when I run demo one, it's going to input these commands into the command line. So if I would open up just here, we already know the commands because that's what we found out in our script file. And we've just taken those commands and we've shoved them into what is now a Lisp. So even if all you've ever done is use script files and that's what you're comfortable with, this alone means you can run Lisp files and you can now create custom commands. But you don't really have to learn much about AutoLisp. That's my point here, is you can very quickly take your old or existing SCR files and convert them into more controllable Lisp files. So I'm going to save this file. The other really, really cool thing about using Visual Studio Code is the fact that we're allowed to debug the code. So what this means is effectively it's going to attach itself to AutoCAD and it's going to load this code here. And as I test things, so when I run this code, it'll actually, if there was a problem with it, like an error, maybe I mistyped something, it will tell me and it'll help me figure out where it's going wrong. So if I come over here back to AutoCAD and I type in the command demo1, notice here that I now have a new command showing up, and if I hit enter, there we go. It's created that square for me. So now I can just do this as many times as I want. This Lisp file has been loaded and this custom create command has been created effectively. Now this will go away next time I close AutoCAD, but I'll show you how to add it to your startup suite in a bit. But maybe I don't want the square to just always appear on my origin. Maybe I want it to appear anywhere I place my cursor. So I run the command and I pick a point and it drops the square there. So in that case, we have this initial coordinate value here, but we want to be able to input a value there. So what we could do is we'd need to create what's called a variable effectively and store wherever we click in that variable. And this is pretty straightforward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a new line here and let's do my brackets. And effectively, I'll just bring this up here. We're going to set Q, which means create variable called C1. And we're going to run this little command here, get point. And then I put in a little bit of text here to say select your starting point. So, like I said, we'll just go set Q, C1, get point, and then in the quotation marks, I'm going to put, you got to put a little \n right at the start. That basically means new line. Again, this is what I mean by the syntax and the formatting can take a little bit to get used to, but once you've kind of figured it out and you understand how it works, you'll be flying it in no time. So select starting point. And now we have a variable C1. So when we run this, it's going to create this variable C1, and then it's going to ask us to select a point. And when we select that point, whatever coordinate that may be, it's going to store those coordinates in this variable here called C1. So now we need to replace this starting coordinates here. This is what's called, this is a fixed coordinate. This is hard coded as what we call it. So we're going to swap this out for the variable. Now variables you don't put into quotation marks because quotation marks are used for putting what's called a string or a series of numbers and letters directly into the command bar. But variable, if I put brackets around this, it would literally type in C1 into the command bar, which AutoCAD won't understand. So instead of that, I take the quotation marks away from it. It's going to just take the value of C1 and put it in here. So let's try running this. I'm going to save this and I'll refresh so I can reload my scripts or restart them by clicking this button. If I come back in here and I type demo 1. So now you can see it's asking me for my starting point. This is another great reason why I like using Visual Studio Code when you're even just testing stuff. Being able to just click that little restart button and, you know, there you go, it's loaded all the new code in. So now I pick a starting point, so maybe I'll pick all the way over here. But now notice that rectangle has gone over here because the second part of my code here is still telling it to go to those relative coordinates. Or not relative, sorry, absolute coordinates. So there's a few different ways we can get around that. We could either input relative coordinates or we could input dimensions. And again, so you can see here, excuse me, after picking the first point, I'm going to input the command D. And again, how I know how to do this is simply, I sat down here and I typed in the command here, rectangle. And then look, we've got specify first corner point. So first corner point, and then we have a few new options here. So dimensions, that's where I'm getting that D command from. And so from here I can type in 100 and then 100. And then the only last thing really is picking what direction it's going in when we're using this method. So what I'm going to do is after C1, we've determined that after C1, I need to put in the command D. And then we need to put in 2 more commands. Instead of giving it coordinates, I'm going to type in 100 for both of those. And the only last one is kind of the final coordinates for what direction it's in. But if I type in the original coordinates again, it'll just place it so that the bottom left of the square is on my cursor, like where my cursor is. So we now have this new little script here. Again, I'll refresh. So it reloads the script inside AutoCAD. And now I can again type the command demo1, select my starting point, and there you go. So now I can just, with a simple click of the button, this hitting enter to reuse the last command. But you could even map this to keyboard shortcuts if you wanted to, which is really handy. So like you could honestly, I've done this. I had a load of different sheet sizes and different borders that I had to do. So I couldn't run a script on all of them. I had to just open each drawing, but I'd go into it and I'd go A0, and then I'd hit, you know, whatever keys I mapped for my A0 scripts. And then I'd go into the next one, and then maybe A1, and I'll hit the keys that are my A1 scripts. So instead of manually loading everything, I was just opening a drawing, hitting 3 buttons, closing the drawing, rinse and repeat. The last little thing I want to kind of show is just how we can load lists directly into AutoCAD. So if we wanted to load a list directly, not using Visual Studio Code, so say we have a list that we've created, we know it's working because we've done all of our testing, and we want that to load every single time we open up AutoCAD. What we'll do is here under the Manage tab, under the Applications tool palette, we have this Load Application option here. And if I select this, I'll get a new dialog window. So here I could choose from this drop-down list files and load the file this way, but this will only load it into my current drawing. If I wanted it to show up all the time, so anytime I opened up AutoCAD, that list file was run, I'd use this Startup Suite option here. I click on Contents, and here I can add, and then I can locate my Lisp file and add that to my Startup Suite. And that means that anytime I open up AutoCAD, that Lisp file will be added in. So I know I just showed very, very basic thing with creating a square. But the thing is, anything that you can do in AutoCAD can be done using a Lisp. So they can be as simple or as complex as you need them to be. An example of a slightly more complex one is this demo I have here. So effectively, we had a customer who had a table of weldments, and they specifically wanted it split evenly either side. And the problem was the number of weldments changed depending on the drawing that we were on. So we couldn't really just use like a single block, because that's how my colleague was doing. They were using a block and they were just typing. They had a block of like 50 weldments, and they would just type into each one what they wanted. So I came up with this script here. Effectively, all it's doing is creating 2 lines of text, and based on the number of weldments. And I have 2 starting points here because it was easier to just like pick the 2 points where each of these rows would form. So again, if I want to run this, go to run and debug, attach it to AutoCAD. So if I run demo 2 here, so it's going to ask me how many weldments do you have? Let's say 23. And then it'll ask me to pick the 2 starting points for the columns. And then it's going to generate that list of numbers and, you know, keep them directly underneath each other. So this was mainly used for, because we had this table going across, and we just needed an easy way to split these numbers in 2, because the main problem came in when we were running into odd numbers of weldments. I've also got scripts for things like purging unreferenced xrefs, binding xrefs, a lot of xref cleanup, because that is usually the most tedious work. Things for importing page layout, importing title blocks, changing attributes, changing text, changing colors of layers. You're only limited by your imagination. What I really do like about this language is if there's a will, there's a way, right? But creating scripts can be a lot to learn at first, but there are tons of Lisp files available online from other people who have written them. Most of what I learned was from learning off what other people had done before me. The only thing I would say is, obviously, if you're downloading and running anything from the internet, please be careful and make sure you trust the source. You are running code on your machine, so any time you're doing something like that, please just be careful about what you're running. Now, I haven't run into anyone who's malicious, but I just have to make that point clear. So that's pretty much all I can cover in this very small snapshot of what we can do. Like, I was never going to be able to talk about all the ins and outs of this, but I hope I may have sparked an interest in a few of you to go and check this out. If you want to learn more, so I'd love to run more webinars on this, and I might do some more specific in-depth ones if we have enough interest. But in the meantime, if you're interested in learning more, don't hesitate to contact us. So my contact information is there. My name's Craig Niven. You can contact me at either c.niven@procad.ie or craig.niven@symetri.com. They'll both come through to the same email for me, and we can set up, you know, a call or a demo, or even if you have things like you could see where scripting could be useful, but you don't have time to make it yourself or to learn it yourself, then that's another situation where get in contact. You know, I'd be absolutely happy to help you out with that. Obviously, any questions, just hit me an email.